Hello friends, you're welcome to my channel. My name is Amaka. If you're new here, please click on the subscribe button and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell so that whenever I upload new videos, you'll be notified. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make a cowl kaftan. So let's get started. So this is the fabric I'll be using. Now this fabric is by 60. The length is by 60, and I have my front panel and my back panel here. This is my front panel and this is the back panel. I've drawn some lines already. Now this is my hip point, this is my knee length, and this is the hem of the dress. I'm going to take my shoulder measurement. Now my shoulder measurement is 14 inches. 14 divided by 2 gives you 7 inches. So this is 7 inches. This is 7 inches. Now from this 7 inches, I'm going to take my sleeve length. My sleeve length is 14 inches. So this is 14 inches. 14 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance, 1 inch hemming allowance, which I'm going to use to fold, which I'm going to use to turn the sleeve. So now what I'm working with is 22 inches. What I have here is 22 inches. Now I'm going to take my neck measurement. Now my front neck width is 3 inches. Because the gown is going to have tie, I'm going to tie the neck. So that's why I don't want the width to be too big. So the front width is 3 inches. And the front depth is 4 inches. The back width is also 3 inches. And the back depth is 1 inch. So I'm going to connect it. Now connect this point. Now from this point, I'm going to come down by 2 inches for my shoulder slant. So this is 2 inches for my shoulder slant. And I'll connect it. I'll connect this point to this point. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take my round sleeve. Now my round sleeve measurement is 12 inches. My round sleeve measurement is 12 inches. 12 divided by 2 gives you 6 inches. So from this point, now this is my what I have here is 21 inches. plus this seam allowance is 22 inches, 21 inches plus the seam allowance gives you 22 inches. Okay, so now from this point I'm going to take my round sleeve measurement. My round sleeve measurement is 12 inches. 12 divided by 2 gives you 6 inches. So I'm going to mark 6 inches here from here. This is my 6 inches. Okay, so I'll connect it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is this. Now I'm going to come down to this point. Now on this point I'm going to take my hip measurement on this point. Now this line, this is my knee length. This is my knee length. It's not my actual knee length. This is 2 inches above my knees. 2 inches above my knees. So I'm going to take my hip measurement on this line. Now my hip circumference is 40 inches. 40 divided by 4 gives you 10 inches. Plus 2 inches for ease, to enable me to move freely, gives you 12 inches. Plus 1 inch seam allowance gives you 13 inches. So this is 12 inches. 12 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance, 13 inches. So I'm going to connect. Now I'm going to pull this part because my table is small. I'm going to pull the same measurement I have here. I'm going to take the same measurement on the hem. So I'm going to pull this up for me to be able to take that measurement. Now my hip measurement, my hip circumference is 40 inches. 40 divided by 4 gives you 10 inches. Plus 2 inches for ease gives you 12 inches. Plus 1 inch seam allowance gives you 13 inches. So I'm going to mark. Now this is my 12 inches. Plus 1 inch for ease. Plus 1 inch seam allowance gives you 13 inches. Okay. So now I'm going to connect this point to this point with a straight line. Okay, so I'll take it back. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the midpoint of this line and this line. This line is 12.5 inches. So the midpoint of this line is, this is the midpoint of this line. This is the midpoint of this line. So from this point, I'm going to connect this point to this point. This is the midpoint of this line. I'm going to connect this point to this point, and I will take it up to the round sleeve. I'm going to connect it to this point. So this is how I'll do it. Okay, now this is the, so I'm going to do it this way. Okay, so I'm going to mark my 1 inch seam allowance. From here I'm going to mark my 1 inch seam allowance. I'm also going to mark my shoulder allowance, but my shoulder allowance is ½ inch seam allowance. So I'll cut it. Now I'm going to start by cutting the neck. I'll cut the back first. So let me cut the front neck. You see that I separated it from the back. This is the back and this is the front. It's the front I'm cutting now, so that you don't make the mistake of cutting your back and your front together. So this is the front and this is the back. I'm going to cut the lower part. And I'll cut the shoulder. Okay, so this is it. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. So this is the front. This is the back. This is the right side of the back, and this is the front. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew it. Now this is the right side of the front panel and this is the right side of the back panel. So I'm going to place it right side facing right side, and I'm going to start by sewing the shoulder. I'll join the shoulder, then I'll join the shoulder. After joining the shoulder, I'll join the side. After joining the shoulder, I'm going to join the side, and I'll leave the sleeve. Now I'll leave the sleeve opening. I'm going to join the shoulder, then I'll leave the sleeve opening and I'll join this part. I'm going to sew this part and sew it down, and I'm also going to do the same thing here. After joining the shoulder, I'm going to start from here. I'm going to sew here and sew it to the lower part. So I'll do it and show you. After that, I'll show you how to attach the tie to the neck. So now this is it. This is my dress. I've sewn it. I've joined here. I've joined the sides. I've joined the shoulder. Then the lower part, I didn't hem the lower part because of this design. What I did, I had to trim the lower part so that I can have this design, the design from the lace. So that's what I did. Now the neck. Now the neck, this is how I'm going to. Now this is the tie. This is the tie. I've cut it out already and I've folded it into two. I folded it into two. Now this is it. I folded it into two and I stitched here and stitched here. Now this is the midpoint of this fabric. This is the midpoint of this fabric, and this is the midpoint of the back panel of this dress. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this because I've stitched this part. I'm going to turn it to the right side. I'm going to turn it to the right side. And now this midpoint, this is the midpoint. I notched it. I notched the midpoint of this tie. Now I'm going to place it on this. Now this is the midpoint of the back panel. I'm going to place it on the back panel. Right side, now right side facing right side. Right side of the tie and right side of the dress. Right side facing right side, and I'm going to sew it. I'm going to sew it. What I did was I measured it. Now I'm going to sew it to the front. I'll sew it to the front. This is the midpoint of the front panel. And I'm also going to sew this one the same way with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now take note, it's one side that I'm holding. It's one side of the tie I'm holding. So I'm going to sew it right side facing right side. I'll sew it to the front. I'll sew it to the front and I'll stop here. I'll stop here. Then after that, I'm going to bring this part. I'm going to bring this part after sewing here. Okay, let me sew it and show you. Now this is it. I've sewn here. I've sewn here with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now after that, I'm going to bring this part and I'm going to fold it. I'm going to fold 1/2 inch seam allowance inside and I'll sew it. Now this is the midpoint. I notched it. I'm going to place it on this midpoint and I'll sew it this way. I'll sew it in such a way that you will not see the seam allowance. I'm going to top stitch. Now I'm going to sew it. I'll sew it in such a way that you will not see, I will hide this seam allowance inside. I'm going to sew this one too. I'm going to sew it to this point and sew it to this point. Now this point I've already sewn here. You see how this point is. I've also fold. Now this is my round sleeve. I've folded it inside. I've hemmed it. So I'm going to do this and show you the finished look of this dress. So this is it. I've finished sewing. Now if you look at it from here, you're not seeing the seam allowance. And you look at it from here, you're not also seeing the seam allowance. I've hidden it. I did it in such a way you will not see it. So this is it. So I'm going to tie it this way. So that's just it with this tutorial. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Subscription is free. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lizama Stitches. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye!